Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana, and we're here at 318 Latino Studios for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. And absolutely can't wait to have today's discussion. It's going to be a fascinating one. Our guest is Dr. Barzanna White. Barzanna?
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it already.
Well, hang in there for my first question because I'm going to provide some background and it's going to be sort of a long question. And if I get anything incorrect, please correct me. But to the best of my knowledge, you are the Caddo Parish District School Psychologist.
I am.
And in your role, you focus on student supports, positive school climates, suicide prevention, bullying prevention, and safe and drug-free schools.
I do. And a few more things to boot.
I'm sure. And you're also, if I'm not mistaken, the lead responder for all crises in the district.
I am.
So I want to get into a number of different areas of your expertise today, but let's start here. In speaking about cyberbullying, you once said that certain conversations need to take place between a parent and a child before the child is ever allowed to enter cyberspace. So my question is, can you talk some about what you recommend parents explain in these early conversations? And are there other precautions that you suggest parents take as their kids become users of social media and participants in cyberspace?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you have to consider is the developmental age of the child, the cognitive ability, the emotional stability of the child, and overall mental health and well-being of your child. And so, people always want to say, well, what is a great age for me to, allow my child to have social media? And I will say, depends on your kid. And most parents know their children best if they really are invested in that child and they're working with their child on a regular basis. So first of all, I would say you have to be an engaged parent. That's most important. Know what your kids are doing. And if you are looking at just in general, what I would recommend, I would say you need to explain the difference between conflict and bullying. We all have conflict. There are people that we don't agree with on a regular basis. But we have an equal status. We have an equal balance. There's no real intent to harm someone else. And when we accidentally do that, then we can turn around and we can apologize for that because we realize we've crossed a line that somebody feels is not appropriate. Bullying, on the other hand, is when we do have that imbalance of power and it's intentional to hurt someone else. And sometimes kids just don't have the skill set. They haven't been taught. And even as parents, they may not have been taught the difference. I often say, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I didn't have to worry about the bullying situation because I'm of that age. And did we have bullying? Absolutely. Did we have that at school? Absolutely. But when we went home, we didn't have social media. And so it stopped at 3:30 in the afternoon. You also had a community of support in your neighborhood, and it was okay to correct someone else's child. Not to belittle, not to harm, but just to guide them in what is right and what is wrong. And those are the social skills that we all need if we're going to be successful in life.
And we've gotten away from that. Is it not? So I don't have children, for full disclosure. Is it not okay in this day and age to correct other people's children? Have we gotten away from that?
A lot of people are because they're afraid to correct somebody's. First of all, you have to have great rapport. So if you live in a neighborhood where you enjoy that sense of community, everybody kind of knows who lives on each block. You know the kids that are in that household. There are good people living there. Their animals. Their pets, you kind of know their habits, and you've got that sense of community, then I think that's more acceptable. But in the world where we tend to be more distant and we tend to, go to work, come in and not socialize, then I think you really have to build that rapport if you want to have that ability to kind of see your community as that village that helps to raise, your kids as well as other people's children.
That makes perfect sense. And I've heard you talk about or suggest maybe starting kids with dumb phones.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I thought that was great advice. And a good thing for parents to consider?
Yeah, when I'm thinking about just a phone that really doesn't have a lot of capabilities, you can't search the internet, you can't have a social media account until they prove that they are responsible. And with that responsibility, you also have to teach them that when you're talking about putting something out on a social media site, for instance, this podcast, it's here long after I'm gone. What you say, and a lot of times what our kids say to somebody via social media, they wouldn't dare think about doing in person. But for some reason, they just, they don't have that concept that it's actually hurting somebody, that it's going to be there forever. So an example that I used, and forgive me, I watch a lot of different shows, but one of them that I remember clearly was Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. And they, that is a vetting process. They usually start with over 1,000 that want to be a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, and they, drop it down to like 20 something. And one lady had made it just about to the end, and then they found her social media site. And they said, based on what you have posted, although you would have made this year's team, you're not the image we want. And so even colleges and universities are looking out there because they have a reputation to uphold. That goes with professionals as well as kids. So be very cognizant about what you post because it's there forever. And a lot of those sites are not owned in the United States.
Right.
That we don't own those, so we don't control those.
So talk to me about, let's take both sides of cyberbullying. So first of all, like what kind of recommendations or suggestions do you have if someone is on the receiving end or feels like they're being bullied? What are kind of first steps or things that you suggest a victim of cyberbullying do?
Yeah. Talk to your parent or your guardian. Talk to your teacher. Talk to your school counselor. One of those three people should be acting on that. And then also don't delete the information. And don't engage in the banter back and forth. So what we have problems with is when somebody has actually tried to bully someone else, but then the child comes back and does an equal or worse offense to try to get even with the other kid. So at that point, it's really not bullying because it's tit for tat. And so parents have a hard time buying into that sometimes. So if you get a text message, screenshot it. If you get something posted on one of the social media sites, again, take a picture of it. That's your evidence. That's your documentation. And bullying is something that I don't think is going to go away. It may actually, I have a whole lot of concerns with AI coming in. We've already begun to see a few of the things where you can superimpose bodies and heads and, in other places. So the technology really is out there, but we haven't caught up to what we should be doing in terms of the technology. So back to your original question, and I talk a lot. Back to your original question about those phones that really don't have any capabilities. When you are thinking about moving your child up into a phone, I think you need to have some devices on that phone because there are some apps that you can actually hide what's going on that phone. And so parents need to be aware. And there are online courses, there are courses at universities, there are other places that you can go and get that information. I will tell you, I'm also not of the cyber age. So a lot of what we've done, we've had to learn, but I'm smart enough to have staff that are much younger that can keep up with all of that stuff.
Incredible. Yeah. And I'm of the dinosaur age too. I didn't have to fortunately deal with cyberbullying. All right. So you were in your role with Caddo Parish Schools during COVID. I think you told me before we started, you're currently in your 29th year, if I'm not mistaken, with Caddo.
Yes.
So we've spoken numerous times on this podcast about the negative impact that COVID had on our school-age kids and the challenges it posed for our students and teachers. Mm-hmm. Because I've heard you speak about this some in the past, my question for you are, what are some of the positive things that actually came out of COVID?
I think one of the most positive things is we began to slow our lives down a little bit. And we also began to prioritize what's important, what's not important. And whether it was forced or not, you had to spend time with families. And by simply doing that, you began to have some of those old school values again. Instead of everybody being on a phone, because a lot of times that wasn't an option. You would sit down and you would play board games, and you would actually, sit around at a dinner table and you would talk, and you would find out a whole lot of information that way. You also had some things like building new family traditions. I can tell you it had blessings and it had negative impacts as well. But we got better at technology. We were forced to, whether you were teaching at a university, whether you were teaching in a school district, whether you were trying to figure out how you were going to provide mental health to kids.
Because of Zoom
and team meetings and everything else. And we found out, we all can do this. So we all got to learn something new as well. And I don't think learning anything, a new skill, is a bad thing. I think you should have one new experience every day, and you should learn something new every day. And that's what keeps you driving and alive and mentally well.
Yeah, and no one talks. I mean, we rarely ever hear about anything positive coming out of COVID. So it's interesting to hear about a couple of the things that maybe it did do in a positive way or manner for us.
Yeah, we did have some negative, of course.
Sure.
We have about 85%, unfortunately, of our children that don't receive mental health, except that need it. We only have about 15% that still receive it at school, but those numbers are improving. And we also have seen, and it depends on the research that you pull because it's all over the board, but up to about a 65% of increase in mental health issues, primarily bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and anxiety disorder.
And we've talked a number of times, whether it was with Carolyn Hammond or Clint Davis, about ACEs in this room and on this podcast. It seems like a lot of Caddo's maybe awareness about the importance around ACEs increase because of COVID or during COVID as well. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So those adverse childhood experiences are real. And so you have the original study that was done through the Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente. And then you also have an expanded Philadelphia study that takes into more urban settings for another few questions. But what we found out is that you have to take a look at all of those things. It's just like saying, one thing, one negative factor, one risk factor is going to mean X, Y, or Z for this kid. It's not a simple formula. I wish it was. It would make my life a whole lot easier. But you have to take into account the risk factors and the protective factors. And then the ACEs make a difference. But I know individuals who have been very successful in life that have had high number of ACE scores, but they've recognized it. They've also learned how to build resilience, and they've learned how to utilize the skills that they have and push forward, and they've gotten the treatment, whatever that may be, that they've needed. And so they are successful adults today.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned Laura Baxter as well. She's been on here, and we've talked a lot about ACEs with her and resilience and resiliency. Where are we? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but where are we today in Caddo schools in terms of getting all of our teachers trained in ACEs? I know it's a priority. It's a big
priority. Yes. There have been several of us that have been on the ACE training team as well as the trauma-informed care practitioners. Casey Monero now spearheads that with social emotional learning. And so a lot of her work and our work dovetail together very nicely. Our division is the Division of Mental Health, Wellness, and Safe Schools. And we focus on a lot, like you said earlier, with PBIS and MTS, positive behavior intervention and supports, multi-tiered system of supports, as well as bullying prevention and other things, and culture and climate. So we have a priority of training all of our staff, not only in ACEs, and I would say we've done a really good job. Now, every school district has turnover, and so you're always having to come back every year and train whoever's come in. We are trying to work on training our substitutes as well in all of those things. And then we have some pilots for our trauma-informed care schools that we plan on expanding, hopefully with more grant money as we can. And the early projections look really good, despite the fact that we have a high poverty rate.
The early projections in terms of the outcomes that are being achieved?
Yes, in terms of the outcomes that are being achieved. We look at, we triangulate a lot of data, but we're looking at things like the school's culture and climate. We're looking at their tiered fidelity inventory scores. We're looking at suspension data, expulsion data, mental health, referrals to mental health, and outcomes of mental health. And all of that we utilize to be able to write grants. So
fantastic. And I know COVID really raised awareness.
Yes.
So we spoke earlier about the conversations that you recommend parents have with their children in an effort to reduce or prevent cyberbullying. I guess my question is, what are some other things our parents can do in the home to help our schools and help our teachers?
The number one predictor of being successful in school is having some positive influence in your life for 2 or more years. And, we would hope that would be a parent. And that's hard because I know how parents are oftentimes pulled. They may be working 2 or 3 jobs, but there has to be a priority there. You also can't be their friend. There will be time when your relationship evolves later on after they are past the school age years, and you can be their friend at that point. But you have a primary role, and that is of parent. You set the boundaries. You set the ground rules. Every household needs to have firm, fair, and consistency in what they provide their kids. They need to also have felt safety, even though they may, especially with kids that come from trauma, they may not feel safe, even though you've provided everything in the world because of trauma. And again, that's as individual as each individual child.
And positive, when I hear the term pro-social adult, that's the same thing as some positive force for 2 years. Is
right.
that correct?
Mm-hmm. And so if parents will do that, and then if they have questions, come up to the school as an ally, not as an adversary. You will find you've heard the old saying, you will get more flies with honey. Okay, well, that's very true. You will catch more with honey. And so if you come up not in an angry or, and I understand there's a lot of things that may happen that you feel that way, but you yourself also have to regulate your own emotions because you are the model for your child. So if you're getting upset and you're coming in angry and you don't see the value in school, the kid is soaking all that in just like a sponge. And so we could go back to Bandura, we could go back to a lot of the other theorists, but basically modeling what you want, whether it be a teacher or a parent or a coach, is of primary importance.
Yeah, I love that. That's critically important. So I'm listening to something else that you said in the past. You once said it always becomes the balance in education. How much mental health should we provide and still be an academic learning community? So my question for you is, if you could briefly talk about some of the mental health initiatives that have taken place in Caddo schools in the last decade or so, and how you personally think about this balance between providing mental health to our students and also providing a place of academic learning.
Right. This is a tough line to walk. I will just tell you that. Schools can never become mental health agencies. If we do, then we've lost our priority. That's the bottom line. But we also know at the same time, if you don't have great mental health, you're not going to be learning. When you've had trauma, you're not feeling your best, your lower brain is working, your primitive brain. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That's the bottom line. If your upper brain is working, then you are ready to learn. So if you have mental health issues going on, absolutely we need to address that. We started many years ago vetting some of our mental health rehab agencies, and so that some of our students could actually receive services, but we have very specific criteria about when they can come in, how many times a week, which primarily is 1 time a week, unless we have some extreme exceptions. And then we would like them to rotate in non-academic periods. And I say that knowing, the PE teachers and the music and the art, those are all important things too. So there's a give and take when a parent says, I need this to occur. in the school, that they must realize that they're also giving up something when those kids aren't in those other classes as well.
Let me interrupt one second. So when you say, so give me an example of the kind of service that a student may receive at a school that may take them away from a different academic activity.
Right. Well, let's just say that the student is hooked in with XYZ agency, and that particular agency, maybe the child has been diagnosed with ADHD, and so they're providing some interventions for ADHD. They may be providing the parent as well, not on school grounds, but some multisystemic therapy, which is whole system family work. But they also may be providing, if the child has depression, some specific coping mechanisms, counseling skills, etc. Normally, that's going to be within the framework of that period, whatever that looks like. So at elementary, it might be a 35 or a 45-minute period. At a high school, it might be a 60-minute period.
But these services are taking place on the campus.
Yes, with an outside agency who is billing for Medicare, and they are getting that money for that agency.
Okay, and how are schools are there special classrooms set up, or what are the spaces where this is taking place on the actual school campuses?
Hopefully in a private area. And we tell all of our agencies that depending on the school, we may not be able to accommodate you at that moment in time. So, if you have a large school that has 2,000 plus kids, you may not have 4 office spaces available for them to do mental health services. In other cases, we have plenty of room and it's not a problem.
And ACEs, I guess part of ACEs training for our faculty and our teachers is to enable them to better recognize mental health issues as they're occurring in their classrooms with their students. And so I guess just really dumb it down for the super lay person who's listening to this, trying to understand what does it look like in Caddo schools in 2024. I'm in a 4th grade classroom, a student's being disruptive. I'm a teacher. How do what are my options and what are my choices?
Sure. So there are some new laws, bullying laws and other laws. I think there were 800 that were put on the books this year that affect education. So I would be lying to you to tell you that I know all 800 by heart. But a couple of them are very... one of them in particular is related to your question. And so when we're looking at some of those, we are now required to provide all teachers with some information on mental health and what that looks like in a classroom. Because teachers, depending on when they come out of school, out of college, and what college they attend, would determine what their knowledge or their skill set would be. And so some of the basics would include, what are some behavioral characteristics that you need to pick up on? What are some mental health issues? So I would say, if a kid is cutting or if they have some if they're more internalized behaviors, they're sitting there, they're not really engaging with anybody else, they're crying. We know the externalizers. Those are the ones that are throwing fits, that they're flipping over desks. Trust me, they refer those all day long. Those are behavioral concerns. We're more interested in our department because they have a department for the behavioral issues. Sometimes those overlap. We're more interested in the things like the anxiety and the depression and the bipolar and some of the personality disorders, sometimes some ADHD and some other things. And even though we also deal with things like impulse control disorder, oppositional defiant, and the list goes on and on. We're looking at that. That's number one. We also train for bullying every year. We train for character education every year. We train classroom management and suicide prevention every year. And a couple of years ago, one of the bullying laws actually mandated that bullying prevention programs were on all campuses. Suicide has been around for quite a while. Louisiana was the second state, believe it or not, to sign on board many years ago with the Jason Flatt Act. And we've been providing signs of suicide in our schools way before Louisiana mandated it. So Caddo Parish is kind of ahead of the game when it comes to mental health, wellness, and safe schools.
And so, just staying in the classroom for a second. So if I'm a teacher and I suspect something mental health related is going on with one of my students, what is
What's
sort
the
of
process?
typical protocol or process?
The process is that they would bring that to the school counselor. The school counselor is
They would interrupt class in that moment or wait?
They would wait.
Okay.
Yeah, they would wait, unless it's something that's critical. They would wait. They would bring that to the school counselor. They would probably refer that child through an SBLC, which is School Building Level Committee, which is a regular ed process. They may put interventions in place through PBIS. Hopefully we're doing school-wide interventions and we're doing them well, because that's part of what we should be doing. But they may decide that, maybe 5 kids in their room have more concerns, and whether that's academic, behavioral, or social emotional. And then those kids probably would be put in a group with parent permission. That could be anger management group. It could be conflict resolution. It could be restorative practices, or it could be something for academics.
So I bring it to I'm the teacher. I bring it to the counselor. Maybe the next step is I'm trying to keep it real
simple.
The next step is for the counselor maybe to meet with the student one-on-one to assess the problem themselves. And then maybe the next step is for the counselor to contact the parent, maybe set up a meeting one-on-one with the parent.
And that's that SBLC if they think it needs to go further. Yes.
Okay. And then if the parent agrees, then maybe set up some new procedures to accommodate that particular student.
Yes. And then if that child moves forward, let's say you put those interventions in place and they're successful, then we want to keep those interventions because obviously they're working for a time being. We also want to wean them off of it. If they're not successful, then they would move up to more intensive intervention. So you may move that kid from a group intervention to an individualized intervention.
And kind of stupid question, but it's running through my head as you're talking. What do we do in the situation where teacher refers to counselor meets with the student, counselor feels there's an issue, parent disagrees and doesn't give permission for any intervention to take place? What are our options at that point?
Parents still have a lot of rights, especially under the new laws that went into place this year. And so unless it's a danger to self or others, or it's a child abuse issue, you really can't force the hand on something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those were my set questions today. I told you before we started, those were just a few things that, been doing this a really long time, doing super critical, important work in our schools. Are there other things that you think we should know about your world that is so important that maybe we're unaware of, or just things that you want to talk about? We have all the time.
Well, I was going to say, we have changed a lot over the years if you look at just the country in general. And, we have new systems in place. We're more situationally aware than we used to be. When I started, I saw less than 99 kids a year. Now we're, most systems are up to, 1,400 like we are, or even more. We want to make sure that we are trying to protect all of our kids as best we can. Let me interrupt
one more time. So when you say you're seeing 1,400 a year, so I know you're at the Harbor now personally, or have an office at the Harbor. The 1,400, are those just students that are coming to counselors? Or when you say we're seeing 1,400 a year, what does that mean exactly?
Well, most systems today have what they call notifications. So whether you're using like a Navigate 360 or a Lightspeed notification, your cell phones, your computers, anything that's a device that's linked to a school system is going to be monitored. And one of the reasons is because of safety and security. So let's just say you have a child who types on a Google search something that says, "to kill a mockingbird," but that computer system is going to flag the word kill. And so even though that's related to an English story, it's going to flag that that's something that needs to be addressed just to make sure. You may have, which kids are curious, after something has occurred around the country. You may have had a mass shooting or something else. You may have some kids that look up school shooting or what type of gun. That's going to flag. It's also going to flag things like hate language. It's going to flag things that are considered possible suicidality. So somebody that says, "I want to kill myself," or "I'm feeling so sad, I don't want to be here anymore," that's going to flag. So again, when you started with the cyber stuff, that has led to all of this.
All right, I'm a reveal my technical deficiencies and how dinosaur I am. So this 360 you're talking about and these things being flagged. So I'm sitting in a classroom, I'm on my iPhone, I'm Googling something. Someone is monitoring that inside the school?
It's not inside the school. It actually is an app that we purchase, and that goes to an external entity. And so when like Lightspeed gets flagged, myself and the counseling supervisor, as well as Don Gibbs, our director of security, and one of our IT people, and then the Shreveport police all get a notification. And then one of us handles that. And since I'm first on the list, I usually am the one, or my team, they're the ones that handle that. And if it's a false flag, like To Kill a Mockingbird, it's listed as false flag, we close it out, and nothing else is done.
But I guess what I'm asking is, like, from a technical standpoint, how am I being monitored or watched or flagged? Does that make sense, Michael?
Right. If you're on any sort of a school device,
okay, it has to be a school device.
It has to be a school device or school school-related internet.
Okay.
So even my personal, I have a work phone and a personal phone. So if I'm on Caddo's Wi-Fi,
I got you.
Then anything I do is going to be, if it's inappropriate, is going to be flagged.
Okay. I didn't do my research well enough
that's okay.
Today. I didn't realize that that's what was taking place.
And that's not just Caddo. That's all over the United States.
Sure.
Again, being that dinosaur, in my day, you could have said something like, man, if you don't stop that, I'm going to kill you. But that was pre-Columbine. Now, with all the things that have happened, we have to be more alert.
Sure.
And we want to protect our kids, and we want to protect our teachers and our parents who happen to be on campus with us. So all of that's critical in today's time, and it's just an evolution of the times. And that's not a Caddo thing. It's an every school thing that are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I'm 51, and I just, as we were talking today, I'm thinking, I'm not sure I heard the words together. I'm not sure I heard the words mental health until I was in my late 20s or 30s. So obviously we're really evolving, and that's becoming much more of a...
And it's not taboo anymore. When we think about mental health and wellness and social emotional skills, those, you have to have those to be effective functioning, whether it's a child or as an adult. And unfortunately, most individuals don't seek mental health services, for whatever the services may be, except for about 10 years after their initial onset. And so we provide a lot of different programming in the school setting. We have life skills, which we have Project Northland, we have Second Step, we have Steps to Respect. We have a litany, I would say, of preventative programs that are out there designed specifically for bullying prevention, mental health and wellness, you name it, trying to prevent everything we can. So back to your question about the mental health and the balance. In my utopian world, if I had my way, we would dedicate at least 1 hour every week, preferably in first period, that would be a class meeting. And the homeroom teachers would be responsible for that. And that would be where you would take all of the information, all the questions, you would build that culture with the kids in the room. So you made asking questions okay. You made that more like a family unit where there was nothing that was basically within limits, obviously, off topic or somebody couldn't ask. And that's where you would design your social emotional learning and all your prevention initiatives. And then, gosh forbid, if you did lose a teacher by, had cancer and died, then you have a natural kind of a group already in place that when you have to break that news to those kids, it's like breaking it to your family. It's not like somebody coming in for the first time and, they just don't have that bond. And so if I had my way, that would be what we would do in every school. Do I want to make our schools mental health agencies? Absolutely not. But I will tell you that I am all about prevention, because if we do prevention, then we're not putting out fires all day long. And that's one of the reasons why I have written in my course of time and have received $27.5 million for Caddo Parish grants.
It's amazing.
So,
Anything else you want to? And if not, that's fine. We've covered great, rich, incredibly important stuff. But and this concept of prevention, the more I do this podcast, the more I do this work, the more I realize how many people I greatly admire and respect think the same thing. That if we can do a better job on the front end, it's going to be less expensive on the back end, and we're going to live in a safer, healthier world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything you do, everything you have done, and we're so fortunate to have people in the community like you.
Thank you.